welcome. If you are watching and listening now, it means you have chosen to give yourself a pause, a moment entirely your own, away from the noise of the day. This is Opulent Dreams, a place where time slows down, where stories flow gently, and where sleep arrives without being called. Tonight, I have the privilege of guiding you slowly towards rest. There is nothing you need to do. Simply listen and let go. If you wish, you can support this journey with a small gesture by following the channel, liking this video, and leaving a comment telling us where you are watching from tonight. A quiet way of being present together, even from afar. For now, though, this time is yours. Lower the lights. Settle into a comfortable position. Allow your body to find its own balance. Soften your breathing. There is no need to control it. Just allow it to slow down. The world can wait. Your worries can remain outside this night. I wish you a deep, elegant, natural rest. Let yourself be gently carried. And when you are ready, let the dream begin. Close your eyes. Let your body sink softly into wherever you are. Feel the weight of your legs, your arms, your shoulders. Breathe slowly. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Now, imagine that time dissolves, that the centuries fold upon themselves like the pages of an ancient papyrus, and that suddenly, very far away, very gently, you begin to hear the sound of water. A slow sound, unhurried, almost imperceptible. It is the Nile, the great sacred river that since the beginning of time has bathed the land of Egypt with its infinite patience. You are in Alexandria, not the loud and luminous city of the daytime hours, but the Alexandria of the earliest hours before dawn, when the sky still holds within its arms the last deep blue of night, and the stars, though weary, have not yet abandoned their watch. The air smells of salt from the Mediterranean Sea, which is close, always close, like a constant whisper in the city's ear. And it smells of something sweeter too, of lotus flowers, of cedar resin, of incense that someone, in some corner of the palace, lit a few hours ago, and whose thread of smoke still rises, slow and silent, toward the ceiling, painted with golden stars. This is the great royal palace of Alexandria. Its walls of white stone reflect the faint light of the torches burning in the corridors. Its marble floors, cold and perfect, hold the echo of thousands of footsteps that have crossed them for generations. Its columns, tall and elegant, support ceilings decorated with friezes of gods and pharaohs, with hieroglyphs that tell stories of eternity. Everything here speaks of power, of beauty, of time. And at the heart of this palace, in the most protected, most perfumed, most silent chamber of all, Cleopatra sleeps. Cleopatra, the seventh Philopater, the last queen of pharaonic Egypt. The woman who spoke 9 languages, who knew the secrets of astronomy and medicine, who had sailed the Nile beneath canopies of silk and had dined with the most powerful men of the known world. She, whom the priests called daughter of Isis, she whom the people called simply the Queen, with that capital letter that needs no explanation. She sleeps. Her breathing is soft, almost invisible, like that of someone who knows exactly how much space she occupies in the world and needs no more. She lies upon a low and wide bed built of dark ebony wood, with inlays of mother of pearl and ivory that form constellations along its edges. Upon it rest layer upon layer of Egyptian linen, the finest in the known world, woven with threads so thin they almost let the light through. Those who have touched it say It is like resting upon still water. Around her, 4 braziers of gilded bronze keep the temperature of the room constant and gentle, and in them burn tablets of Kaifi, the sacred incense of Egyptian temples, prepared according to an ancient formula with 16 ingredients: myrrh, cassia, juniper wood, terebinth resin, mint, pine nuts, raisins, honey, sweet wine from the island of Chios. Its aroma is complex and soothing, a blend of sweetness and burning wood that invites the body to remain still and the mind to think of nothing. The walls of the chamber are covered with hangings of linen dyed in lapis lazuli blue and golden ochre, upon which anonymous artisans have embroidered scenes of the river: herons perched upon lotus flowers, crocodiles resting on sandbars, papyrus boats drifting with no apparent destination. To contemplate these scenes, even in dreams, transmits a particular stillness. The stillness of things that have always existed and always will. Beside the bed, on a small table of translucent alabaster, rest a few things: a small alabaster flask of Syrian rose oil, distilled for months until it becomes an essence so concentrated that a single drop perfumes an entire room; a silver bowl with fresh water, in which float 3 petals of blue lotus; and a bronze mirror, polished round, with a handle in the shape of a woman holding the solar disk above her head. In this mirror, come morning, Cleopatra will contemplate her own face with the same attention an architect gives his plans, with detail, with intention, without hurry. But that will come later. For now, the night still protects the palace with its dark mantle, and in the outer corridors the Nubian guards stand motionless as statues, their spears resting on the ground, and their eyes trained to see in the darkness. Beyond them, the other rooms of the royal wing sleep as well: the queen's personal handmaidens, the women of her inner guard, the seamstresses, the perfumers, the musicians, an entire world of women that revolves around her as the planets revolve around the sun, each in her orbit, each in her function. And the palace breathes. It breathes with the slowness of ancient buildings, with that deep and muffled rhythm that is not heard with the ears, but with the feet, with the bones, with something more primitive than thought. The stone holds the warmth of the day and releases it slowly through the night, and so the palace is never entirely cold nor entirely warm. It is always temperate, always just right, always comfortable in that specific way of places that have spent centuries learning how to be so. Outside, in the city, Alexandria begins to stir. The fishermen have been at the harbour for hours, drawing in their nets with the mechanical motion of those who have done the same thing thousands of times. The bakers have lit their ovens before dawn, and the smell of warm bread drifts over the still dark alleyways. The first carts begin to move along the cobbled streets, loaded with ceramics, with fabrics, with spices, but all of that is far away, on the other side of the gardens, on the other side of the walls, on the other side of a world that for now does not exist. For now, only this room exists, this soft light, this scent of Kaifi, this silence that is not empty but full, full of the breathing of a woman who rests, and of a palace that surrounds her, and of a river that flows, and of a sky that will soon begin to change colour. Imagine that you too are here, not as an observer, but as part of the silence itself. You are the still air of this room. You are the thread of incense smoke that rises unhurried. You are the soft light that barely illuminates the edges of the bed. You have nothing to do. There is nowhere you need to go. You are simply here, in this perfect instant between night and dawn, floating in the oldest stillness in the world. Breathe. The kaifi fills your lungs with its sweetness of resins and honey. The linen of Egypt is soft beneath your body. The Nile flows, always flows, at the slow rhythm of things that are in no hurry because they know they have all of eternity. And little by little, very slowly, as when ink dissolves in water and ceases to be one thing and becomes another, the thoughts of the day begin to lose their edges. Worries become less sharp. The borders of things soften, and you, just like Cleopatra on her bed of ebony and linen, begin to sink into that deeper layer of rest where the body no longer weighs and the mind no longer speaks. There is only calm. There is only the Nile. There is only the soft dawn of Alexandria approaching from very far away, very slowly, like a promise that is in no hurry to be kept. Rest. The sky above Alexandria has begun to change. Not suddenly, not with any dramatic announcement, but in the way that truly great things change. Slowly, almost without anyone noticing, as if the world had simply decided, at some imprecise moment between midnight and dawn, that there had been enough darkness for today. In the palace, someone has already lit the first oil lamps of the day. A handmaiden, young, with bare feet on the cool marble, walks along the outer corridor of the royal chamber with the practiced step of one who knows that silence is a form of respect. She carries in her hands a silver tray on which rest 3 alabaster flasks, a small basin, and a linen towel so white it seems newly born. She stops before the door. She waits. She listens. From within, a faint sound, almost imperceptible. The sound of someone moving between sheets, breathing differently, leaving sleep behind. The handmaiden enters, and so begins Cleopatra's day. Not with haste, never with haste. Time in this palace has a different consistency to the time of the outside world. Here the hours do not run, they flow, like the Nile, like oil falling slowly from the neck of a flask. The queen rises slowly on the bed, and her handmaidens, who have appeared almost without being summoned, as if they were made of the same air as the room, move around her in a silent and perfect choreography they have been rehearsing for years. One delicately draws back the layers of linen. Another brings a small silver cup of warm water scented with ginger and honey. The first liquid of the day, the one that wakes the body from within, before anything else does. A third gently gathers the queen's hair, dark and long, and holds it away from her face with both hands, without speaking, without making any sound. Cleopatra drinks slowly. She looks toward the window, toward that rectangle of sky that every morning reminds her that the world is still there, that the Nile still flows, that Egypt is still hers, and then, with the calm of one who knows exactly what comes next, she rises to her feet and moves toward the bath. The royal bath chamber is one of the most extraordinary rooms in the palace. To reach it, Cleopatra passes through a short corridor whose walls are lined with ceramic tiles painted in turquoise blue and Nile green, colors that imitate water, that invite water, that prepare the senses for what is to come. The floor of this corridor is covered with fresh petals, renewed each morning before dawn by a single servant whose task is that, and only that, to bring petals from the garden and arrange them on the marble with the silent generosity of someone decorating an altar. Because in a certain way, all of this is a sacred ritual. In ancient Egypt, the cleaning of the body was not merely a physical act, it was an act of spiritual purification. The priests bathed several times a day before entering the temple. The clean body was the body worthy of the gods. And Cleopatra, who was queen and priestess at the same time, who embodied in her own person the goddess Isis upon the earth, knew this better than anyone. The bath chamber is wide, wider than one might expect. Its walls rise high, covered in painted reliefs depicting scenes of the Nile in flood, water spilling over the fields, fish leaping among the reeds, water birds spreading their wings over the current. And at the center of the room, occupying nearly all the available space, rests the bath. It is not a bath, as you might imagine. It is an entire pool, carved from a single solid block of white alabaster veined with lines of gold and amber, large enough for a person to lie completely flat and still have water surrounding them on all sides. Its edges are smooth, rounded, polished to such a degree that a hand running along them finds no roughness, no interruption, only that perfect cold smoothness that alabaster has before the warmth of water and body slowly tempers it. This morning the bath has already been prepared. It has been preparing for hours. Since before dawn, two servants have been carrying jars of water heated in copper cauldrons over acacia wood embers, emptying them into the pool with infinite patience, adjusting the temperature with small additions of cold water when needed until reaching that exact point of warmth that neither burns nor cools, but simply envelops, as if the water had the same temperature as the inside of the body itself. And upon that water they float. Thousands of rose petals float, arrived in baskets from the palace gardens and from the market stalls at the harbour. Roses from Syria, roses from the Delta, roses of a red so intense they tint the water a pale and translucent pink. White jasmine flowers float too, releasing their perfume with the same generosity with which the sun releases its light, without holding back, without reserve, filling the air with something sweet and almost dizzying. And among the petals, already dissolved in the warm water, the true protagonists of this bath, the milk, donkey milk. According to ancient accounts, Cleopatra required 700 donkeys to provide the quantity of milk needed for her daily baths. 700. This was not a symbolic number, nor an exaggeration of the chroniclers. It was the actual figure that the palace administrators recorded in their ledgers. 700 donkeys milked each morning, their milk collected in large terracotta jars and transported to the bath wing before the heat of the day could alter its composition. Donkey milk contains lactic acid, though Cleopatra knew neither that word nor needed to know it. What she did know, or perhaps simply felt, was that skin immersed in that milk emerged different, softer, more luminous, as if the water had dissolved an invisible layer of time and weariness and had left beneath something fresher, more alive, more new. Mixed with the milk and the petals, there are other things. Sweet almond oil, cold pressed, which forms an iridescent film on the surface of the water that catches the light and returns it in small flashes. Honey, from the Fayum, thick and golden, which dissolves slowly and turns the water into something almost edible in its sweetness. Fine as pumice powder for the elbows and the heels. And in a separate flask, which a handmaiden holds with both hands, as if it were a sacred object, the most precious ingredient of all, A few drops of Syrian rose oil, the same that rests in the alabaster flask beside the bed, so concentrated and so costly that its price equaled that of several trained slaves. Cleopatra pauses for a moment at the edge of the pool. She looks at the water. She looks at the petals floating upon it without direction, moving barely with the invisible current of the steam rising above. And then she lowers herself inside, slowly, with that particular grace of bodies that know they are being observed and have learned to move as though it does not matter to them. The water receives her, envelops her, rises along her skin with a softness that is almost an embrace, and for a moment, just one moment, the queen closes her eyes and is not queen of anything. She is only a body in warm water. She is only warmth and silence and the scent of flowers. The handmaidens work in silence. One of them, the most experienced, the one who has spent the most years in this service, and whose fingers know the texture of the queen's hair better than they know anything else in the world, begins the process of washing. First, scented water over the head, poured from a painted ceramic jug, slowly, like rain. Then a paste, prepared with Nile clay, castor oil, and aloe extract, applied to the scalp with circular movements, slow movements, so slow that the border between the bath and sleep begins to grow indistinct. The steam rises. The jasmine floats. The rose petals move in slow circles on the water, pushed by the imperceptible movement of a body that breathes, that rests, that exists in this moment without thinking of the next. You can do this too. You can let the warm water surround you, let the weight of your body dissolve into the temperature of the liquid. Let the rose petals, even if they exist only in your imagination, float upon your skin with that lightness that belongs to things that weigh nothing at all. Let the perfume of jasmine, mixed with that of honey and roses, fill your lungs with something sweet and thick and completely still. There is nothing to do. There is nowhere to go. Only this alabaster room. Only the sound of water moving very slowly, the oldest sound in the world, the sound that precedes all other sounds, and to which all other sounds return when there is no longer energy to be anything else. Cleopatra's body in the warm water. Your body, wherever you are, sinking a little deeper, the breath slower, the thoughts further away, the jasmine, the roses, the honey, the alabaster. The water holds you. Everything else can wait. The bath has ended, but the morning continues with that same soft slowness, that same quality of time that does not run but pours, like honey from a spoon, like oil from a tilted flask. The handmaidens have dried the queen's body with linen cloths so soft they are barely felt. Then came the oil, argan oil mixed with a few drops of liquid myrrh, applied with long, slow strokes, always upward, always in the direction in which the blood flows when the heart beats slowly and the body is at peace. Myrrh has a particular smell, not exactly sweet, something darker, more ancient, the smell of temples and of something that endures, that resists time with a serenity that is not resignation, but certainty. Cleopatra closes her eyes while her handmaiden's hands distribute the oil across her back. She breathes in the myrrh. She lets it enter. The dress for the day is of white linen, pleated into hundreds of tiny folds, fastened at the right shoulder with a gold scarab brooch with lapis lazuli eyes. Around the neck, a wide collar of gold, carnelian, and turquoise. At the wrists, gold bracelets in the shape of coiled serpents. the eyes lined with black coal, extended in that elongated shape we recognize even today as something specifically Egyptian, specifically eternal. And on the forehead, the uraeus, the golden cobra, symbol of the pharaoh's power, resting still and sovereign above the last queen's brow. Cleopatra looks at herself in the bronze mirror. She takes her time, not only out of vanity, but because she knows her appearance is a language, that every element speaks of power, of divinity, of continuity with the pharaohs who came before her. The mirror returns an image that satisfies her. She smiles very slightly, and she steps out into the garden. The gardens of the royal palace are a world apart. They extend to the south, in successive terraces connected by white stone staircases, lush and generous, far larger than one might expect within a walled enclosure. The colours arrive first, green in all its versions, the dark, satiny green of the date, palms rising like living columns, the silvery green of ancient olive trees, the brilliant green of water lily plants covering the three ornamental ponds, and then the flowers, roses in every shade from nearly white to nearly purple. White jasmine climbing the stone arches, releasing a perfume still fresh at this morning hour. Blue and white irises beside the water, pomegranate trees in bloom, fig trees heavy with dark fruit. Beside the second pond she stops. The pond is oval, bordered by limestone, its floor laid with blue and green ceramic mosaics imitating the bed of the Nile. On the surface, water lilies open in the morning light. Beneath them, tilapias with silver scales moving in perfect synchrony, and among them rarer fish of an almost intense orange brought from the markets of the Orient, drifting between the lily stems with a slow elegance that invites one simply to watch. Cleopatra sits on the edge. She rests her palms on the warm stone. She looks at her own reflection in the water, the golden uraeus, the black-lined eyes, the collar catching the sun, and superimposed upon her image the slow clouds crossing the Alexandrian sky. She breathes. Further into the garden, beneath a canopy of interlocked sycamores, the ground stays cool and damp even in the Egyptian summer heat. This is where the lotuses grow, not in water, but in permanently moist earth. Their flowers of an impossible blue, too intense to seem real. The lotus was sacred, symbol of rebirth, of the sun emerging from the water each morning. Cleopatra crouches and touches one with her fingertips. The petal is cool and slightly waxy, alive in a way that recalls silk but is more present, more real. She holds it a moment. She releases it. Somewhere above her, a bird begins to sing among the branches. Long, unhurried notes, repeating with small variations, like a melody searching for itself. She listens. She does nothing more than listen. On the way back to the palace, she pulls a ripe fig from a branch. She opens it with her fingers. The red, dense flesh releases a smell that is pure summer, pure Egypt, sweet and earthy, the smell of things the sun has ripened slowly over weeks. She eats it without hurry, letting the flavour expand and last. Charmian draws a little closer. Does the queen wish the garden pavilion prepared for reading? Cleopatra finishes the fig, wipes her fingers with a precise and unhurried gesture. Not yet, she says, and she keeps walking. You are walking too, though without moving, through that garden of palms and jasmine and blue lotuses that now exists somewhere between memory and dream. The scent of roses reaches you in soft waves. The sound of water in the ponds is constant and low, a background you would only notice if it stopped. You are beneath the sycamores in their cool shade. The garden holds you. The garden has always been here. The garden always will be. Rest. The sun has already crossed its highest point in the sky above Alexandria. The city out there, beyond the palace walls, has entered that particular stillness of the Egyptian midday in which even the wind seems to have decided to take a rest. The merchants have gathered their fabrics and their spices beneath their awnings. The children have abandoned the streets. The dogs sleep in shaded corners with that total surrender to rest that only animals and the very wise possess. The Mediterranean to the north keeps moving, but even its waves seem slower, heavier, as if the heat had made them a little more dense. Inside the palace, the thick stone keeps the air cool. Cleopatra has rested through the central hours of the day in her private chamber, lying upon divans of cedar wood covered with silk cushions brought from the far Orient, while a young slave fanned her with a fan of ostrich feathers on a golden handle. She has slept a little, or perhaps has not slept exactly, but has inhabited that intermediate state that the Egyptians knew well, and for which they had specific words, that place between wakefulness and sleep, where the body rests, but the mind still registers the sound of the wind, and the smell of the incense, and the texture of the silk beneath the palms of the hands. But now the light has changed. The sun has begun its descent toward the west, and with it the heat has lost its sharpest edge, and the air has recovered a gentle mobility that makes the flames of the lamps sway slightly, and the linen fabrics move with a barely audible whisper. It is the hour when Alexandria wakes from its midday rest and fills again with sounds and movements. It is also the hour when the palace begins to transform, because tonight there is a banquet. The banquet hall of the royal palace of Alexandria is one of the largest and most splendid rooms in the known world. It can seat 400 people, though tonight there will be fewer, perhaps 100, perhaps 120, the guests who will occupy the tricliniums arranged around the central space. Its dimensions are so generous that even filled with people, it maintains a sense of spaciousness, of air, of room between one thing and the next, that in the banquets of other palaces, smaller and more crowded, simply does not exist. The ceiling is the first thing one sees upon entering. It is painted night blue, a blue so dark it seems genuinely nocturnal. And against that background, anonymous but extraordinarily skilled artists have painted stars of gold leaf that capture the light of the hundreds of lamps arranged throughout the room and return it multiplied, flickering so that dining here is like dining beneath a real sky, as if the walls of the palace had dissolved and the entire night of Alexandria had come inside to sit at the table. The columns supporting that ceiling are lined with alabaster up to half their height, and from the midpoint upward, painted with scenes of gods at feast, Dionysus with his cup, Isis with her wings spread wide, Horus with his watchful eye, all of them celebrating with the limitless generosity of divinities who need to ration nothing, because for them everything is infinite. The floor is of black marble veined with white, imported from quarries in southern Egypt at a cost that the palace administrators recorded in their ledgers with an ink that seemed almost to hesitate. Upon that black floor, the oil lamps arranged in circles and spirals create patterns of light that seem to move when one walks among them. And the smell. The smell of the banquet hall is a complex composition that has taken hours to build and that could not be deliberately reproduced. It is the sum of the incenses that have been burning since the afternoon, plus the fragrance of the fresh flowers decorating each table, plus the first breath of the stews being prepared in the kitchens that have begun drifting through the corridors like a promise, plus something more diffuse and more ancient than all the rest, the smell of candle wax, of lamp oil, of the old wood of the furniture, the smell of the banquets that have taken place in this very room for generations. Tonight's guests are a carefully calculated mixture. There are Alexandrian nobles, men and women from the oldest families in the city, wearing their finest jewels and their best pleated linen garments, sitting with that blend of pride and anxiety that people always have when they want to be seen, without appearing to want to be seen. There are also ambassadors, one from Nubia, with his thick gold necklaces and his skin so dark that the lamplight turns it into something almost metallic, one from Syria, with his perfumed beard and his eyes of a calculated intensity, one from Cyprus, small and nervous, who cannot stop looking around as if afraid of missing something important. There are philosophers and physicians from the Museum of Alexandria, that most extraordinary academic institution in the ancient world, men who spend their days studying the stars and dissecting bodies and debating the nature of things, and who tonight have set down their papyri and their instruments to come and eat and drink with the same intensity with which they do everything else. And there are poets. There are always poets at Cleopatra's banquets, because the queen loves poetry with the same passion with which she loves philosophy and astronomy and foreign languages, not as adornment or entertainment, but as a form of knowledge, as a way of saying things that cannot be said in any other way. The poets of her court know that they will be listened to with genuine attention, that their verses will be commented upon and discussed with seriousness, and that gives them a confidence that the poets of other courts, where they are little more than background music, do not possess. The queen enters when everyone is already seated. She does so as always, late enough that her entrance is an event, early enough that the waiting has not wearied anyone. She walks through the center of the hall toward the highest triclinium, the one arranged upon a small marble platform from which she can see the entire space without effort, and in her wake, conversations pause, heads turn, something in the air changes in quality. It is not simply that she is beautiful, though she is. It is something harder to name. It is that specific presence that certain people possess, that capacity to occupy space without expanding, to be the center without claiming to be it, to make everything around them seem arranged for them, even though in truth it is the other way around. She sits. She smiles at her guests. She makes a soft gesture with her hand, and the banquet begins. The food arrives in waves. First the appetizers, olives marinated in olive oil with garden herbs, served in silver bowls. Fish roe from Lake Mariotis, mixed with egg yolk and oil, spread on pieces of flatbread, fresh from the oven that still smells of wood smoke. Dates filled with almonds and honey, so sweet they make one close their eyes involuntarily. Fresh figs split open and drizzled with Cypriot wine vinegar and freshly ground black pepper. Then the soups, one of lentils with cumin and fresh coriander, of a warm orange color like the desert at sunset. One of fish with saffron, whose yellow steam rises from terracotta cups like a small domestic fog. And then the heart of the banquet. The cooks of the royal palace of Alexandria are artisans in the fullest sense of the word. They have travelled or learned from those who have travelled. They know the spices of India that arrive at the port of Alexandria on the ships of the eastern routes, the cinnamon and cardamom and turmeric and long pepper. They know the preservation techniques of the Phoenicians, the marinades of the Greeks, the roasting methods of the Nubians, and they have developed in the kitchens of this palace over decades of silent experimentation, a cuisine that belongs to no single tradition but contains all of them. Tonight, there is Delta duck roasted with honey and cumin, its skin so crisp it genuinely crackles when cut, and its flesh so tender it barely needs teeth. There is lamb marinated for 2 days in pomegranate wine and spices, cooked in a clay sealed pot that is broken open at the table before the guests and releases a perfumed steam that makes several of them close their eyes for a moment. There is Nile fish, the tilapia that Cleopatra watched this morning in the garden ponds. Though these specimens are larger, roasted whole over acacia wood embers with desert salt and oil, and a sprig of rosemary that burns slowly and gives the flesh that flavor of something cooked with patience and with smoke. There are also things that come from far away. Oysters from the Red Sea, served on ice, that the palace administrators have had brought at enormous cost from the snowy peaks of Lebanon, transported in layers of sawdust and straw for days so that it arrives here, to this room, to chill these shells that are opened with a small knife and taste of pure sea, of salt water, of something that has not been cooked or manipulated, but simply brought from the ocean to the palate, with the minimum possible intervention. Dates filled with goose liver from the delta, Syrian pomegranates scattered over salads of fresh herbs, spelt bread baked with caraway seeds, nuts of every known variety mixed with crystallized honey, and the wine. The wine deserves a moment of its own. Cypriot wine, the Commandaria, is Cleopatra's favorite wine and one of the most prized of the ancient world. It is a sweet, dark wine of a color recalling amber or dark honey and flavor into an almost solid density. It is drunk mixed with water, as was the custom in the Greco-Roman world, in proportions that tonight are more generous with the wine than with the water, because tonight is a night of celebration, and because Cleopatra has decided, without saying so explicitly, that joy is welcome. The cups fill, empty, fill again. The conversation rises in volume gradually and imperceptibly, the way water rises in a river when it rains far away in the mountains, without anyone being able to point to the exact moment it changed, but suddenly clearly different. And then, the moment of the pearl occurs. It is a story that ancient chroniclers have told, and that time has polished into legend, but which was born, as all good legends are, from something real. Cleopatra wears in her ears tonight, as on many other nights, the two largest and most perfect pearls in the known world. They are pearls from the Persian Gulf, of a white with a rose undertone that in the lamplight seems almost alive, almost luminous from within, as if they kept their own source of light. They are so large they barely fit between index finger and thumb, and so perfectly spherical that the jewelers who mounted them spent months finding the right setting, because any error in the mounting would have unbalanced their perfection. Their value is incalculable. The palace administrators have tried to put a price on them, because putting a price on things is what administrators do. But each time they try, they arrive at a figure that seems too large to be real, and end up writing it down and then erasing it and leaving the space blank, as if the number refused to exist on papyrus. Tonight, at some point between the lamb and the oysters, when the Cypriot wine has already had time to settle in, and the conversation has reached that exact temperature where everything seems possible and nothing seems too serious, Cleopatra does something no one expected. She removes one of the pearls. She holds it a moment between her fingers in the light of the nearest lamp, and during that moment, everyone nearby stops talking and eating and simply watches, because there is something in that gesture, in that pearl held in the air between the light and the queen's fingers, that turns the instant into something different from all the instants that came before. Then Cleopatra calls a servant. She asks for a cup of strong vinegar, the most acidic wine vinegar in the kitchens. The servant returns with a dark ceramic cup, releasing that sharp and cutting smell of pure acid. And Cleopatra, unhurried, with that calm she has when she wants to demonstrate something without appearing to demonstrate anything, lets the pearl drop into the cup. The silence around her is absolute. The pearl takes a moment. The acid works on the calcium yields, the perfect edges of the sphere begin to blur, and then, very slowly, the pearl dissolves. The cup turns white, milky, cloudy. And where a moment ago there was one of the most perfect and most valuable things in the known world, now there is only a pale and shapeless liquid. Cleopatra lifts the cup. She drinks it, without making any comment, without explaining anything, without needing to explain anything, because the demonstration has explained itself, that true power does not consist in accumulating precious things, but in being able to destroy them without a trembling hand. That real wealth is not what is kept, but what can be spent without thinking twice. That she, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, daughter of Isis, can dissolve in a cup of vinegar the fortune of a prosperous merchant, and then drink it and go on dining as if nothing had happened. Because for her, in a certain way, nothing has happened. The banquet continues. The musicians, who have been playing since the beginning at one end of the hall with a studied discretion that makes them atmosphere rather than spectacle, now raise the tempo slightly. Harps of sycamore wood with gut strings, whose sound is warm and slightly nasal, like something coming from deep within. Double reed flutes that interweave in melodies rising and falling with the same logic that rivers have. Always moving, always changing, never entirely predictable. And the dancers, 6 young women, trained from childhood in the temples of Memphis, who enter the central space of the hall with bare feet and bodies clothed in almost transparent linen, and who begin to move to the rhythm of the music with that specific fluidity of Egyptian dancers, the arms like wings, the spine like the stem of a flower that bends but does not break, the feet barely lifting from the floor, the entire dance as if the body were water, that the rhythm shapes but does not dominate. The guests watch. The conversation does not stop entirely, but becomes lower, more private, whispered between the wine and the lamplight, and the sound of the harps. Pairs form in the corners. Smiles are exchanged that need no witnesses. The banquet has reached that phase where the distinction between food and conversation, and music, and wine, and bodies in movement blurs, where everything becomes a single state of the senses. Cleopatra observes from her elevated triclinium with that quiet attention that is her most characteristic quality. She never seems lost in pleasure, though she clearly feels it. She always seems to be a little outside, a little apart, watching with those black-lined eyes that see more than they let on. She is the perfect host, not because she has created a spectacle, but because she has created a state of well-being and abundance and safety in which her guests can be, for a few hours, a little freer than they are in their ordinary lives. And that, in the end, is what defines true luxury. Not the gold, not the pearls, not the Cypriot wine, or the Red Sea oysters on Lebanese ice, but this, the feeling that for a moment, in this specific place, on this specific night, the world has decided to be generous with you and asks for nothing in return. Imagine that you too are seated in that hall. The lamplight is warm upon your skin. The Cypriot wine, sweet and dark, rests in the cup you hold between your hands. The harps play from somewhere you cannot see, and their music arrives, as all good things arrive, without effort, without your having to move toward it, simply arriving because the world has decided that tonight it can be this way. The food has filled the body with that satisfied heaviness that is not weariness but fullness. The aromas of cinnamon and cumin and honey and roasted fish still float in the warm air of the hall, mixed with the incense and with the perfume of the fresh flowers someone has arranged on each table with the generosity of one who has an enormous garden and knows that tomorrow there will be more. The dancers move, the music continues, and you, without effort, without conscious decision, begin to sink a little deeper into the cushions of the triclinium, and the sounds grow more distant, and the lamplight grows softer, and the wine in the cup weighs less and less in the hand that no longer makes the effort to hold it. The banquet continues without you, or rather continues with you inside it, with you who are part of it, who are the scent of the incense and the note of the flute and the reflection of a lamp in a blown glass cup. Breathe. The harps play, the ceiling of golden stars looks down at you from above with the patience of eternal things. Rest. The banquet ended some time ago. The guests have left slowly, carrying in their bodies that satisfied and warm heaviness that a night of good food and wine and music leaves behind. The servants move in silence between the tables, stacking the glass cups with a care that contrasts with the careless abundance of barely an hour ago. The palace has recovered its nocturnal breathing. But Cleopatra does not sleep yet. There is in her something that requires an intermediate time, a transition between the world of others and the inner world, between the friendly noise of company and the more demanding silence of solitude. And for that transition, there is a specific place she goes when the banquet has ended and sleep has not yet arrived: the Hall of Papyri. To reach it, she crosses a small interior courtyard open to the sky, where a stone fountain lets water fall into a circular pool with a constant gentle sound that at night, when everything else is quiet, seems larger than it is. The courtyard smells of damp earth and night, and of the jacaranda planted against the northern wall, whose perfume at this hour is only a trace, a promise kept for dawn. Cleopatra crosses the courtyard barefoot. Her feet on the cool marble feel that specific gratitude the body has when something surprises it with exactly the temperature it needed. She opens the old cedar door. She enters. The Hall of Papyri is not large, surprisingly small in fact, compared to the rest of the palace, but it has a quality that large rooms rarely possess. It is exactly the right size, neither too much space nor too little. A room designed to hold one person and their thoughts, with just enough room for both to be comfortable. The walls are covered floor to ceiling with dark wooden shelves, and on them hundreds of papyrus scrolls, some in brown or black leather cases with parchment labels written in small, careful letters, others directly visible, their edges yellowed with age. There are texts in Greek, in Egyptian Demotic, in Hieratic, in Aramaic, in Hebrew, in Latin, in Ethiopian. Because Cleopatra reads in all these languages, she speaks them, thinks in them, dreams in them. The chroniclers of her time always mention it with a mixture of admiration and something resembling discomfort, that she speaks 9 languages, that she is the first of her dynasty to bother learning Egyptian, that when she speaks with the priests of Memphis in their own tongue, that single gesture earns her a loyalty no previous pharaoh of her family had managed to buy with all their gold. Languages, for Cleopatra, are not merely instruments of communication. They are windows. Each one opens a different view onto the same world. And those accumulated differences are for her one of the most genuine sources of knowledge. Tonight, the lamp is already burning on the work table. Charmian had prepared everything. The flame adjusted for sufficient light, a small bowl of fresh water with a lemon slice, a cup of chamomile and honey still warm, exhaling that smell of pure domestic calm. And on the table, carefully unrolled, the scroll she has asked to be prepared. It is an astronomy text, a treatise on the movements of the planets, written by a library astronomer whose name has not reached us, but whose intelligence has preserved in those columns of precise Greek script that even now, 2,000 years later, say true things about how the celestial bodies move. Cleopatra sits. She draws the lamp closer, and she reads. Her fingers move slowly along the lines, as if touch could add something to understanding that eyes alone cannot. From time to time she stops, furrows her brow in concentration, moves her lips in silence, as all ancient readers do. She sips the chamomile without lifting her eyes from the papyrus. The text speaks of Saturn, of how it takes almost 30 years to complete its orbit, making it the planet of long time, of deep thought, of transformations that accumulate slowly until one day something that was always there is suddenly visible. Cleopatra lifts her eyes and looks through the east-facing window. Above the low palace rooftop, a fragment of night sky. She finds Saturn immediately, that point of light that does not flicker like the stars but shines with a serene constancy, like something that has decided to be there and needs no one's approval. She thinks about its 30-year orbit, about how many things change in 30 years and how many remain. At some point, without deciding it exactly, she closes the scroll carefully, returns it to its case, places it back in its exact position on the shelf. She runs her fingers along the other cases without opening them, the way one greets old friends when there is no time to stop, but wants them to know they have been seen. Then she extinguishes the lamp. Not by blowing, but lowering the wick slowly until the flame reduces to a spark and then to nothing. And in the moment her eyes adjust, the room exists in a darkness that does not frighten, but feels like the exact reverse of the light, just extinguished. Then the moonlight entering through the window begins to be enough, soft and blue and silent. The leather scroll cases become dark masses against the shelves. The empty chamomile cup is a circle of silver on the table. Cleopatra looks at it all for a moment, and then she turns and leaves. You two are in that room. sitting near the lamp that no longer burns, surrounded by hundreds of texts that wait without hurry, that will be here tomorrow and the day after and 100 years from now. There is something deeply reassuring in that. Knowledge does not rush. Ideas wait with the patience of things that know their value, does not depend on being found quickly. The chamomile has left its trace of calm in the air. The moon is in the window. The papyri wait on their shelves. Your eyelids carry a weight they did not have a moment ago. Your thoughts branch and blur and lose their edges. The ideas about Saturn and its 30-year orbit mingle somewhere with the smell of the garden this morning, and the sound of the harps, and the warm water with rose petals in the alabaster bath. Everything becomes one single thing, one single soft texture, one single slow rhythm. The moon in the window, the papyri on their shelves, the silence of the palace breathing. Rest. Knowledge can wait. Tonight, the only thing that matters is this gentle weight on the eyelids, this breath growing deeper, this body yielding slowly, like the papyrus that rolls back upon itself when no one holds it open any longer. Rest. It is late. Not the late of sunset, nor the late of midnight, but that hour with no precise name, because it occurs so deep inside the night that most people never know it from the waking side. It is the hour when even Alexandria has lowered its voice to an almost inaudible murmur, when the last merchants have closed their stalls, and the last wanderers have found a doorstep against which to rest their heads. When the cats that govern the alleyways move like shadows over the stones without making any sound, the palace sleeps. Almost all of the palace sleeps, but there is a small silent procession crossing the southern wing of the royal complex, with oil lamps protected from the wind by screens of translucent alabaster which make the light they cast soft and diffuse, as if the lamps were not burning, but dreaming of burning. There are 6 people. Cleopatra at the centre, with a cape of dark linen over her shoulders. Charmian to her right. Eros with a blanket of fine wool folded over her arm. And 3 Nubian guards in silence, with bare feet on the stones so as to make no sound. They are going to the river. The boat is small and elegant, of black lacquered acacia wood with low lines that make it seem part of the river rather than an object floating upon it. Beneath the stern canopy, wide cushions of woven wool in dark blue, Nile green, and desert ochre. Small terracotta lamps burn at the sides of the hull, casting golden ripples on the water that move with the current. Cleopatra steps aboard. The boat moves gently beneath her weight, a soft oscillation, and then settles back with that quiet solidity of things well built. Charmian arranges the blanket over her legs. The guards remain on the landing. The boat is untied, and with a movement that seems to require no effort at all, it moves away from the landing and enters the Nile. The Nile at night is black and silent, and larger than it seems by day, as if the darkness returned to it a dimension that ordinary daylight takes away. The surface of the water reflects the stars imperfectly, with those gentle distortions the current produces, so that the stars in the water are luminous smears that move and separate and come together again. And the stars in the sky are beyond counting. The Milky Way crossing the sky from northeast to southwest like a river of light mirroring the river of water below. Orion, with his belt of 3 perfectly aligned stars. Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, whose annual appearance marked the beginning of the Nile flood. and among all of them, quiet and serene, Saturn, the planet of 30 years, the planet of long time. Cleopatra drinks a sip of palm wine. She holds it in her mouth a moment before swallowing. Then she returns the cup to Charmian, and the stillness returns. The boat arrives at a gentle curve in the river, where the sandbar creates a small zone of still water. It stops. It floats in that small bay, with the same naturalness with which a rose petal floats in the alabaster bath. Cleopatra rests her head upon the cushions. She closes her eyes, not to sleep, not yet, only to listen better. The water against the hull, the barely there wind among the palm leaves on the bank. The frog still singing from the reeds, with the patience of one who knows their song matters, even if no one is listening. And beneath everything, the river, like a bass note holding the entire melody, the foundation upon which every other sound in this place exists. You too are on the boat, lying back upon the blue and green wool cushions, with the blanket over your body and the entire sky above your head. The boat moves very gently, only what the river wants. The water speaks against the hull in that language of soft consonants that the body understands without the mind needing to translate it. Your eyelids are heavy, not with the weight of tiredness, but with the weight of rest, the weight of things that have already done what they needed to do today. The frog sings in the reeds, the palms whisper on the bank, the river flows, always flows. Somewhere between the river and the sky, Cleopatra sleeps. Her breathing changes, deeper, more regular, with that perfect cadence that only belongs to one who has ceased to be aware that they are breathing. Charmian adjusts the blanket over her shoulders in silence. The terracotta lamps keep burning. The boat keeps floating. The Nile keeps flowing north, toward the sea, toward the horizon that at some point becomes everything else. And you are sleeping too, or you are about to sleep, or you are in that nameless place between the last awareness and the first dream, where the body no longer weighs, and the mind no longer speaks, and all that remains is a soft and edgeless feeling. The river, always the river, flowing without hurry, without destination, only flowing because that is its nature, and because its nature is enough. Cleopatra sleeps. Egypt sleeps. The stars keep watch. And the Nile flows. Sleep.